GPB, winner of 11 Emmy Awards, including Station Excellence. Thank you for your support.
The 2012 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, brought to you live from Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now, the Republican race for the 12th Congressional District.
And good evening, I'm Richard Rogers, evening news anchor for News 12, WRDW-TV in Augusta. We'd like to welcome you, our viewers and listeners on GPB Radio, and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the debate among the Republican candidates in Georgia's 12th Congressional District. The 12th Congressional District covers most of central and east Georgia. Some of the largest counties include Bullock, Burke, Lawrence, and Richmond counties. Now let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Rick W. Allen, President and CEO of R.W. Allen & Associates, a construction corporation I should say, in Augusta. Next, we have Lee Anderson, current state representative from the 117th District and a former member of the Columbia Board of Education as well as the Columbia County Commission. Wright Mcleod, a naval officer, attorney, and small business owner, and Maria Sheffield, an attorney. Here is the format for tonight's debate. It is the first round, and each candidate will answer a question from one of our three panelists. In the second round, the candidates will each ask a question of one of their own opponents, and each candidate will have time for rebuttal in that round. And in the third round, the panelists will continue questioning the candidates. Finally, each candidate will have 30 seconds to make a closing statement. Before we get started, though, let's meet our three panelists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have Aaron Haynes, who covers race and politics for the Georgia Associated Press. Next, Shannon McCaffrey, a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And our final panelist is Orlando Montoya, the Savannah-based news producer for Georgia Public Broadcasting. Now let's get started with this debate. In the first round, each candidate will be asked a question by one of our panelists. The candidates then have 60 seconds to answer each question, and as moderator, I'll determine if a rebuttal is necessary. So by random selection, Lee Anderson answers the first question from Aaron Hayes.
Good afternoon. My question is, seeing as you're the only person with past political experience, why do you think that may be an asset over your opponents?
Because this is a very important election, and this time to send someone that's experienced, that has served on the school board, county commission, and also currently state representative, that in all three positions, I have balanced the budget. It is time to go to Washington and balance the budget.
Next question is from Shannon McCaffrey. It's your turn to ask Wright Mcleod a question.
Mr. McLeod, I'm wondering if you could answer a question about the debt ceiling. Are you supportive at all of increasing the debt ceiling in Congress should the government be facing another potential cliff in terms of defaulting on debts?
Well, Shannon, that's a great question, and certainly it is the biggest issue of our time. 16 trillion, that's a number that collectively I'm not sure all of us in this room can understand. But the specific answer to your question, are we facing a fiscal cliff, and do I favor raising the debt ceiling? We are facing a fiscal cliff. And do I favor raising the debt ceiling? No. What I favor is cutting back spending. What I favor is getting our house in order, our fiscal house in order, getting rid of those programs that really the federal government has no authority to be involved in, and getting spending back and not kicking that can down the road like the past Congress has done.
Next, Orlando Montoya, your question for Maria Sheffield.
Ms. Sheffield, good evening. You've said that you'd like to eliminate the Department of Energy. What would that mean for Plant Vogtle and SRS?
You know, the Department of Energy was established under the Carter administration, and I am a strong supporter of nuclear power and, of course, the power plants that we have in the 12th Congressional District. Eliminating the Department of Energy for me means that we are cutting spending in Washington, D.C. Does not mean that we are eliminating our nuclear programs. In the past, nuclear energy has been located under the Department of Defense. I see no problems with moving the regulation of nuclear energy somewhere else and eliminating what I see as a bureaucratic nightmare in Washington, D.C.
And our final question in this round is for Rick Allen from Aaron Haynes.
Mr. Allen, there's been some attention paid in the presidential election about business experience being an asset as a qualification for public office. Why do you see your business experience as a qualification for you to be in Congress?
Because, Aaron, in business, we have to balance the budget. We can't spend more than we make. It's a fiscal discipline, and we don't have that discipline in Washington. You know, we're able to, in business, we do a budget, and we stay with that budget depending on revenues. Washington doesn't do a budget, hasn't had a budget in 3 years. This president has not had a budget in 3 years. I don't know how you run anything without a budget. I mean, it's nonsense, and it must be stopped. You know, we also do 5-year lookbacks. You know, if we're spending money we don't need to be spending, we don't spend it anymore. That's the way we run a business. I want to take those business skills to Washington, and I believe we can balance this budget.
Thank you, candidates. That concludes round one. Now it's time for our candidates to ask questions of their opponents. You have 30 seconds for the question, 60 seconds to respond, and then 30 seconds for any rebuttal. By random selection, Lee Anderson asks the first question.
Thank you, Richard. All the races I've ever been in, I've run a positive campaign. I will tonight. My question goes to Maria. Maria, what is the toughest thing that you've had to accomplish in this election, this race that we've been in this summer?
Thank you, Lee. Thank you for the question. You know, I think the toughest thing about this election really is what is the greatest thing about this election, and that is going door to door, store to store, meeting with the wonderful people in the 12th Congressional District. Unfortunately, too many times what I have seen just in the course of this election since January, small business owners that I have talked to, when I go back a second time to visit with them, I see for rent signs on the door. Just 2 weeks ago, I had received an email from an individual whose restaurant I had been in several times during the course of the campaign, telling me that he had to close his business down because he just could not make it with the regulations, with the taxes that he was facing. And so for me, I would say the best part and the reason why I am in this campaign has also been the toughest part, and that's seeing what people in this economy are having to face.
Thank you. Now, Rick Allen, your turn to ask a question of one of your fellow candidates.
Okay. Lee, you talk about your experience on the school board, the county commission, and now at the in the legislature. The question I have for you, have you ever voted for a tax increase, and why?
Well, Rick, I'll go on and get right to the point of what you're wanting to get to, and that's the T-Splosh. I voted to give the people the option to choose, and also give the people the freedom to choose on which way they want our state and the infrastructure to go in the next years, to go forward. It's just an option. Ladies and gentlemen, I gave you that freedom to choose on the ballot.
You have a chance to rebut that.
What about the tax that you voted for to impose on hospital beds that also required the federal government to increase taxes in return to the state?
The reason why we had to vote on that was because we had to get the most money that we could out of the federal government to come back with their portion. That was the reason. It's just common sense. We maximized the situation to where we could get more money out of the federal government.
Now, but wait a minute. You're running for the United States Congress.
Yes, sir.
And so you're telling me you're running for the United States Congress and you're going up there and you're going to impose more money on the taxpayers so that the state of Georgia can benefit from that?
Rick, say it again. We passed that bill to where we could get the maximum amount of money that was indebted to us on the Georgia state level to where our people could get our money from the federal government.
Gentlemen, I'll have to jump in and call
Okay.
time for that. We have to move on. Maria Sheffield, I believe it's your turn to ask a question of one of the opponents.
Okay. This is for Mr. Wright Mcleod. The Augusta Spirit had quoted you as saying that you were not a hard-charging, hardcore Republican. And then, of course, we know through media events that have occurred throughout the campaign, they actually took a look at all of our voting records, and when taking a look at yours, they determined that the last 4 that they looked at, that you had voted as a Democrat, including in the 2008 presidential primary. And then also, we also know that you've given tens of thousands of dollars to, I would say, liberal candidates
Time's
over the
up on the
course of the
question.
campaign. And so I would like to know how you will conduct yourself in Washington, and if true conservatives can believe that you are going to lead as a conservative in D.C.
All right, Maria, that's a long, drawn-out question, but how will I conduct myself with honesty and integrity, as I always have? Now, let me answer those specific allegations. I have given money to 2 Democratic candidates in my life. What you're not telling everybody is that I've given money to many, many other Republican candidates. Now, those 2 Democratic candidates were, one was a young man who was running against Charles Walker, the most crooked politician in Georgia recent history. And my goal was to defeat him. He's in federal prison right now. And the second Democratic candidate that I gave money to was a young man that I met in law school. As a law student, I was still serving in the Navy. I was flying in the reserves. My wife was working, and we had 2 children. I would take off on a Thursday and go serve my country and come back on a Sunday evening. And
5 seconds. 5 seconds. Go ahead if you
There
regret
were a
that.
group of young men and women who helped me get through law school. And without their help,
Time,
I
please.
would not have graduated.
And Maria, you get a rebuttal.
I believe that the 12th Congressional District is looking for a true conservative, someone who is not going to go to Washington, D.C. and just simply vote, but someone who is going to lead on those conservative issues and those conservative values that are so important to all of us in the 12th Congressional District. I think that the support of a liberal Democrat, even as a friend, someone whose whole campaign was based on the support of Obamacare, is not what people in the 12th Congressional District are looking for.
Thank you. That's time on that answer. The final question in this round comes from Wright Mcleod.
Yes, my question is for Lee Anderson. Lee, we've discussed the budget many times on the federal side, and we've discussed the deficit. Currently, the annual debt is 10% more today than it was this time last year. What is your plan to reduce spending if you get to Congress?
Right, I've said it from day one. I'll say it tonight. I'll be a leader, not a follower. I'm willing to cut my own salary 20%. I'm willing to cut each and every department up to 10% each year and work toward balancing the budget. The only department I will not cut is defense. Also, we need to work toward working our whole tax code, overhauling the whole tax code on the federal level to where we can get toward a fair tax, look at 999, look at all the options that's on the table. I'll be a leader, not a follower, to work toward balancing the budget.
Wright Mcleod, you get a follow-up there.
You know, I think it is important. Everyone should be a leader and not a follower. The problem we have is that in our budget, 60% of what we spend every single year is in mandatory programs. Those are not discretionary. Those are programs that are already on automatic increases. Now, if you're only cutting 5 to 10% of the non-discretionary, not including defense, then all you're doing, Lee, is making the minimum payment on the credit card. The debt on the credit card continues to go up.
Our time is up on that, and if you would, candidates, keep an eye on the time, we would all appreciate it. That way I wouldn't have to call you out and wrap you up uncomfortably. But that doesn't conclude our second round of questioning. For those of you just joining us now, program in progress. This is the debate among Republican candidates for Georgia's 12th Congressional District. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists now who will ask questions of the candidate of his or her choice. Candidates will have 60 seconds to respond. As moderator, I'll get to determine if an opposing candidate gets to have 30 more seconds for rebuttal. So we begin this round with a question from Shannon McCaffrey. Shannon?
This is a question I'd like each of you to answer because it's a fairly big issue in this election. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court recently upheld the health care law. I know each of you is opposed to the health care law, but I was hoping each of you could name one part of the law that you support, if there's anything in the law you support. And if so-called Obamacare was to go away, what would you put in its place? Start with Mr. Allen.
Okay. Good. There's no part of Obamacare that I would keep. I would vote to repeal the entire law. Now, what would we do? Well, the first thing is I believe that all decisions need to be between the patient and the doctor. And that's the fallacy of this program. You got a Washington bureaucrat making those decisions, and that's wrong. They don't know what's best for the patient. The other thing we can do is introduce competition. We've talked about insurance across state lines. We've talked about, there are lots of options. But we really need to get everybody in a room and say, okay, how do we solve this problem locally and in the states? The federal government's got no business in the health care.
Lee Anderson, your response to that question.
Good question. I despise someone wanting to shove the largest tax increase down my throat in American history and call it health care reform. I believe I will repeal it. Also, I believe in freedom of choice. The people should have their freedom to choose which doctor, which hospital they would like to go to. We need to be able to make it where we can have cross-state insurance plans. We need to be able to make it to where people can pool their health plans together to make a greater program for people to have good quality health insurance. Also, I would get in the doctors and nurses and medical people in a room that will help us give us the big picture, not greed.
I'm having to call time on your answer.
People.
Wright, Mcleod, same question to you.
The answer to your question is there's nothing in there I agree with. I believe the law should have been held unconstitutional. The second part to your question is, what do we do to replace it? And I am certainly, my belief is that the physicians and the medical providers need to be in charge of our healthcare system, not insurance companies, not hospitals. I believe in a free market system. I believe in competition. I believe in, a hospital bill that you can understand, that you can read, that you can decipher, that you can comparison shop. I believe in health savings accounts. I believe in medical savings accounts. I believe in making our healthcare system a capitalistic system, because that's what ultimately drives down costs, which is the goal.
And Maria Sheffield, you get the final word on the health care question.
We should appeal Obamacare in its entirety. This is going to cost our taxpayers, our small business owners, trillions of dollars. This is something that our small business owners simply can't afford. It also erodes freedom and liberty, and it takes away the ability for doctors and patients to make decisions together without the federal government being involved. We need to make sure that we have an implemental approach. Simply a 3,000-page bill that was passed overnight is not going to be the answer to our health insurance issues here in this country. We need to focus on things like health savings accounts, allowing insurance companies to sell products across state lines and have the most of products available. Competition is a great thing. And we also need to make sure that we do more with tort reform.
Thank you for that. Orlando Montoya, your turn now to ask a question.
Ms. Sheffield, your question to Mr. Mcleod earlier sort of dovetails with this question that I had, so I'll ask this question of you. The current Congress is one of the most polarized in history, in part because Democrats and Republicans don't compromise, don't work with each other. Do you see compromise and working with Democrats as a dirty word?
You know, compromise so often is actually what has gotten us into this mess. I mean, compromise on the budget. Now we're looking at a $16 trillion debt, a $1.2 trillion deficit a year. I'm sure there are certainly some things in Congress that we can work on together. The deepening of the port in Savannah would be a prime example of something right here in Savannah, where Democrats and Republicans, work together. But at the same time, I think that what people in the 12th Congressional District are looking for they are looking for those transformational policy solutions that are conservative. And they're not wanting us to go up there and say yes to everything the Obama administration wants. We have to send people to Washington, D.C. with the backbone to say no. No to more bailouts, no to more stimulus, and no to Obamacare.
Thank you. Wright, Mcleod, would you like to respond?
Orlando, I mean, you don't compromise your principles. You learn that as a Boy Scout. I learned that as a midshipman at the Naval Academy. You don't compromise on your core values. Those things, the difference between right and wrong. Now, I do understand as a small business owner that there is a difference between good, better, and best, bad, worse, and awful. But on those core principles that I believe in, of less federal government, of less spending, of the Constitution, you don't compromise on those.
And we're out of time on that response. Lee Anderson, your response.
I've been in many meetings with Republicans and Democrats. I've been in committee meetings. I've been in meetings on the local level, but I've never gave up my principles, my values. I work with anybody that's willing to take the great state of Georgia forward and make it even stronger than what it is today.
Rick Allen.
The problem that we've had, at least over the last 60 years, is compromise. I mean, look what it's done to the federal government, the budget. Look, the government has grown. We simply haven't followed the Constitution. And, the Democrats have carried that ball. And, we just need more of us up there so that we can move that ball the other way. And that's my plan.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question comes from Aaron Haynes.
My question is also for all of the candidates. Most of you have had to loan your campaigns money to get through this hard-fought primary, which appears likely headed for a runoff election. My question is, how can you afford to compete for another month and, more importantly, in the general election against Congressman Barrow, who has already got a war chest of more than $1 million? We can start with you, Ms. Sheffield.
This is not an auction. It's an election. It's not like the candidate is going to the highest bidder. And I feel blessed that I have Tea Party, grassroots support across the district, people literally putting $5 bills in my hand and saying, remember me and remember what we're fighting for. As far as competing with Congressman John Barrow, the National Republican Congressional Committee has already purchased $900,000 worth of media time in our district. It's not going to be a question about competing with Congressman John Barrow on money. It's a question about values, about issues, and about principles. And when Congressman John Barrow says he's working hand in hand with President Obama, I know for a fact, based on my experience in the 12th Congressional District, they're looking for someone who's going to work hand in hand with them.
Wright, Mcleod, let's get your response.
I mean, my wife and I recently loaned our campaign $100,000, and I think Ms. Sheffield's loaned hers $100, Mr. Anderson's loaned himself $178, and Mr. Allen's loaned himself $250. It's painful. We're out there raising money to win this election, and then you're right, there will be most likely a runoff. But I believe in the mission. My wife believes in the mission. My children believe in this mission. I have taken time off, 6 months from my job to do this. you look back on it and you go, wow, it's expensive. I don't believe people should be able to buy an election. But it was the right thing for me to do, for my campaign to do. We've raised a lot of money. I mean, we've raised a lot of money. We've got a lot of supporters. And we're going to win this thing. And once we get through the runoff, then I believe that defeating John Barrow is not going to be a problem.
Time is up on that response. Lee Anderson.
Yes, all of us have loaned money to our campaign. But I'm honored to say that I've had the most people within the district that has donated to my campaign too, that has invested into this campaign. They believe in me. They believe in going to Washington and balancing the budget. I believe in donating to the campaign myself. I believe in being a servant, not a politician. I believe that you have to do what you have to do to get the job done. And it's an honor to be able to have the money to be able to win this campaign. Money's not going to win this campaign with John Barrow. Grassroots relationships, and that's what we have. And we're going to beat John Barrow.
And Rick Allen.
Well, as a businessman, I've invested all my life. And I told my investors in this campaign, which, we've been fortunate to raise the most money, I told them, I said, I'd be willing, I am willing to invest in this campaign. And they were very responsive to that. As far as the amount, I mean, we've got a great message. I'm a businessman, I'm not a politician. That's what we need in Washington. We've got to bring jobs to this country. We've got to create jobs. We've got to turn this economy around. And we've got to provide for a fair and equitable tax code. That's what I'm going to Washington to do. I've had 35 years of experience doing that, and I'm willing to invest the money because this is the most important election in our lifetime.
Thank you for that. Shannon McCaffrey, the question is yours.
Representative Anderson, you've been at the state capitol for a while, where, as you know, ethics has been a fairly hot topic recently. Can you tell me if you support a $100 gift cap on one-time, one evening meals, etc.?
Absolutely. I go on down to $25. I mean, I'm not a big spender when it comes to going to supper. We can go and have a hamburger at McDonald's or Burger King. I believe in serving the people. I believe getting this country back on track. I believe balancing the budget. And it doesn't take $100 to get the job done.
Rick Allen, let's go to you on that same question.
Well, I mean, why do these folks take you out in the first place? I mean, I don't understand exactly, what the issue is there. I mean, are they trying to buy you influence? I mean, the way I was raised, you don't buy me. I've been in business 35 years, and you'll see by our track record, we just don't participate in that sort of thing. And I'm not going to do that in Congress.
Maria, Sheffield, same question.
Absolutely I support the limit. When this first became an issue at the state level, and although it is a state issue, I came out immediately in support, released a press release. The thing that I find troubling is, Mr. Anderson, I was actually at a press conference with the Tea Party and Americans for Prosperity and Georgia Conservatives in Action, where he stood up and announced that he was running for Congress and mentioned his support of the pending legislation. But then the very next day, when establishment-type members of the General Assembly and lobbyists decided that the $100 cap was not appropriate, his name came off the legislation, just like, unfortunately, other members of the General Assembly. And I think that's the difference between being a leader and then just going along to get along with the people who are in the leadership.
Mr. Anderson, get a rebuttal there on that statement, if you'd like.
Maria, I never did sign it in the first place. I said I support it, and I still support it. You have to understand, when you got enough numbers, you got to have enough elected officials to be able to get the job done, and we didn't have the numbers. But it's a time where we have to, get the job done, but it's not about the $100. Like I say, you don't even have to take me out at all.
And time is up on that. Mr. Mcleod, I don't believe you've had a chance to respond to that question.
It's a state issue. It's a crazy issue. Absolutely, we should have a ban. I don't even know why we have the discussion. My dad has always taught me, son, first of all, you do the right thing, and second of all, everything you do must look like you're doing the right thing. And I don't know how you legislate ethics. It's very hard, and obviously very hard at the state level. But the answer to your specific question, do I support it? Absolutely.
Orlando Montoya, the next question goes to you.
The 12th district is home to the Ogeechee River, which was fouled by the state's largest fish kill in history last year, and then there was another fish kill this year as well. As a member of Congress, would you vote to strengthen or relax environmental regulations like those that protect the Ogeechee River? And perhaps start with Mr. Allen.
Well, let me tell you, as far as the rivers in the state of Georgia, we need to protect those rivers. Now, we have extremists out there. There needs to be balance. And what we have to do is make sure that we have the right people in place that understand that balance. Right now in Washington, what we have are extremists. And they're running the environmental department there. And, we need people who understand the issues and can offer the balance so that we have the proper balance with our environment.
Same question to you, Lee Anderson.
It's all common sense. We need to make sure our rivers are protected, our water flows are protected, not only the rivers but the air. But we cannot have extremists tell us what we should be doing. We should take a common sense approach about each and every situation, whichever the problem is.
Wright Mcleod on the Ogeechee River fish kill.
Orlando, nobody's for cleaner air and cleaner water than I am. However, the state needs to take the lead. Instead of, we've got EPA and we have EPD, and I'm a believer that the best way to handle regulations is to put it at the lowest possible level. The best way to govern is to govern at the lowest possible level. So you're not going to convince me that somebody in Washington, D.C. knows what's best for the Ogeechee River when we have people right here that know what's best.
And finally, Maria Sheffield.
A certain amount of environmental regulation is going to absolutely be necessary. We know that there are bad actors out there, but what we have seen under the Obama administration is we have seen an expansion of the EPA. It has become a job-killing regulatory machine in Washington, D.C. We have got to get that under control. We have to reform the EPA so that it is working again for the people in the state of Georgia. I will assure you, I grew up hunting and fishing with my parents. I love being outdoors. I know with 100% certainty the people in the 12th Congressional District respect their rivers, and they know best how to protect them.
Our next question comes from Erin Haynes.
Yes, my question is also for you, Ms. Sheffield. Obviously, you're the only woman in this race, and our Georgia delegation has no women on it. So I wanted to ask you, much has been made about the so-called war on women in Congress and state-controlled, Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country. I'm wondering about what your thoughts are on this, and also your thoughts about the absence of women in Congress and also in this delegation.
We are blessed here in Georgia. We have a strong conservative delegation. But the one thing we are missing is a strong conservative woman. And when so many of these issues that we talk about, when we have, the best we have are liberal women across the country standing up, acting as if they speak for all women in the United States. Well, that's just wrong. So I do think that it's extremely important to have true conservative women in Congress. I think it's absolutely possible for a true conservative woman to be elected in the 12th Congressional District, and things have been going very well with the campaign, and I am looking forward to July 31st, and of course asking everyone for their support.
Wright, Mcleod, would you like a crack at that question?
You're looking at a guy that used to live in an all-male environment on a ship. I woke up one day, I have 3 daughters. My wife and I have 3 daughters. I live in a testosterone-free environment at my age, and you know, nobody understands that there are gender inequities in the world, like, you know, somebody who has 3 daughters now. So when you say there's a war on women in Congress, I mean, I don't know of one, but if there is, I certainly, you know, would fight against that. I mean, that's just fundamentally wrong.
Same question to you, Lee Anderson.
If it's a war in Congress against women being a congresswoman, shame on them. I'm here to support the Republican candidate that wins this election. And if Maria's the one, I'm behind her all the way.
And finally, Rick Allen.
I also have 3 daughters, and you know, I've always challenged them to go out and pursue their dreams. I haven't had any of them that want to run for Congress, but if I don't make it, I might suggest that they do, because we need a lot of help up there, and I'll tell you, they're great girls, and they do a fine job, and I'd support them 100%.
Thank you, candidates. Orlando Montoya, your question.
We haven't spoken about military much so far, so I'd like a military spending question if I could. Would you vote to authorize spending on expensive military equipment that the Pentagon doesn't need, but which ends up in the budget anyway as a result of Congress people wanting to bring jobs to their state? We'll start with Mr. Anderson.
No.
Care to elaborate?
We must balance the budget. We must take care of business and get our country back on track. We must pay our debts. We must pay our $16 trillion of debt, pay our bills, get back to the basics, and get our country even sounder than what it is today.
Same question, Rick Allen.
You know, I think probably the military, you know, would need to make that decision. If the military can move a facility and run it less expensively to our state, then I would welcome that. That would save money. But as far as, you know, additional spending, again, you know, we've got a $16 trillion debt. We've got to look for ways to save money. And I believe the military is going to step up. I think and they're already doing amazing things very efficiently, and I think they're on board with it. The whole country's on board with it.
Maria Sheffield on military spending.
You know, constitutionally, the one thing that our federal government is supposed to do is to provide for the protection of this country. So first, I believe that we look at all unconstitutional social programs and look where we can cut there. We need to make sure that our military has the best equipment and best training. You know, strength through might. That's extremely important given what we know what's going on in the world, especially in the Middle East. Now, if there was something that was being recommended that the military insists that it does not need, and we're looking at something that amounts to no more than an earmark or to pork in the federal budget, then that is something that I would be opposed to. But I would defer to the military and rely on what they have to say as to what equipment they need to provide for the defense of our country.
Wright, Mcleod.
Orlando, the way the system works is the military, the Pentagon sends its budget over to Congress, and Congress starts to pad it with things that the military hasn't asked for, and the answer to your specific question is no, I would not vote for it. Now, the way the defense industry gets around it, or the way that the defense industry gets those things into the ultimate budget, is they outsource it into as many different districts as they can. The most recent one was the alternative engine for the Joint Strike Fighter. There were additional C-17s that have been purchased that the military never asked for. You know, John McCain is probably the biggest advocate of trying to keep the defense industry in check. And certainly when I get to Congress, I'm going to be right there beside him.
Thank you, candidates. Shannon McCaffrey, the next question is yours.
One of the biggest tax issues is not that we've been talking about here in Georgia is not one on the federal level, but one that's about to come up on the 31st, which is the T-Splost. Can you tell me, each of you, whether or not you support the T-Splost effort in your region and why or why not? Start with Mr. Allen.
Okay. You know, my position on the T-Splost is, you know, I don't believe voters want to be told how to vote. I don't think my position as a candidate for the United States Congress that I should impose that on them. You know, there's been good debate on that. I want to leave that issue up to the voters. You know, what I tell voters, I said, it's a tax increase, no question about it. But, you know, we also need infrastructure. And, you know, if we deepen that port, you know, we've got to have roads and bridges. I mean, we were in Claxton the other night. They've got 2 bridges down there that the state's probably going to close at any time. So, you know, the way I'd like to do it is figure out how to fund that without no tax increase.
How will you personally vote, though?
I would vote against it because it is a tax increase, pure and simple.
Mr. Anderson, how about you? How will you vote?
I think I've already made myself loud and clear about how I feel that give the people the freedom to choose how they want their state to go forward in the infrastructure. Personally, I'm pro-business all the way. I don't mind having some skin in the game. I don't mind making Georgia one of the greatest states in the whole United States. With the deepening of the harbor, we must have infrastructure in place to go forward. I'll vote for it because I'm willing to help our state go forward and get good infrastructure in place because the local people have chose the projects and the local people will get the money, not Atlanta.
Wright Mcleod.
I'm against T-Splost. It's the largest tax increase in Georgia history. I'm certainly for consumption-based approaches to a tax system. Most people call that the fair tax. If T-Splost were a part of comprehensive tax reform, I would be all for it. I do want roads and bridges. I believe the money is already there. I have an inherent distrust of additional bureaucracy. I don't understand the system, and I have many, many dear friends who support it. And we have a difference of opinion on it. I just don't believe that we need another tax. I believe we need to use the taxes that we pay now more efficiently.
And Maria Sheffield, your feelings on T-Splost?
As a member of Congress, of course, I will work on and then will be responsible for voting on a multi-billion-dollar transportation bill. And that's serious business. And of course, as you mentioned, this is a state issue. And I will speak to you as a citizen, not as someone who is running for Congress. I oppose the T-Splost. I've come out actually with a policy video as well as a policy statement regarding my opposition to the T-Splost. I do not think at this moment that it is time to add an additional tax increase to the citizens of the state of Georgia. We all know that we need infrastructure development here, but I think we need to have a comprehensive approach to that development.
And to remind voters, T-Splost will be on the ballot along with your 4 names coming up in the next election. Erin Haynes, your question for the candidates.
Yes, my question is, for the one of you that becomes the Republican nominee, should you defeat the congressman in November, you would be headed to Washington as a freshman at the bottom of the pecking order. Tell me your plan for being effective as a new lawmaker should you be the one that goes to D.C. in the fall. We can start with you, Representative Anderson.
Good question. I've always said from day one, I believe in being a leader, not a follower. My number one thing is to balance the budget by being an example. I'm the only candidate that's willing to cut my own salary 20%. I'm the only one that's said right at the beginning to cut every department 5 to 10% each and every year, except defense. We must get back on track. We must get back to the basics. And I also would encourage each and every congressman and lady to follow my lead and be a leader, not a follower.
Let's go up the line to Wright Mcleod on that same question. You're a freshman in Washington. What do you do?
You know, it is very hard, and your question is dead on point. You know, our congressional system is built on seniority, and I'm for term limits. You know, I'm for term limits. I'm for an amendment to the Constitution for term limits. But, you know, for anybody here tonight to say that they're going to go to Washington as a freshman congressman and all of a sudden dictate how things done, then they don't understand our democratic process. You know, Churchill had a great line, a great quote. He said, you know, the democratic process is the worst form of government if it just weren't for all the other types. So, you know, what do? You go up there, you make the hard calls, you make the right decisions as you see them, and realize that, you know, it's very, very difficult to get both houses and the president all in line to pass laws.
Thank you, Mr. Mcleod. Maria Sheffield, your thoughts on being a freshman in Congress?
You know, my gender was actually questioned earlier, and I think this is one area where my gender will help me. Obviously, I'm not one of the good old boys. And so what does that mean? That means as a strong conservative woman, being, as far as I know, probably the first woman elected from the state of Georgia as a conservative, that's going to give me a unique platform in Washington, D.C. Now, I am not naive enough to think that I'm going to simply go up there and change the system. But I will join the Tea Party caucus, I will join the Conservative caucus, and I will work with Republicans in Washington, D.C. And these issues that are so important to people here in the 12th Congressional District, I will go up there and fight for those issues time and time again till we bring conservative common sense back to Washington.
Thank you for that. And Rick Allen, you get the last word on this question.
As I said, 2012 is the most important election in our lifetime. And I got a good feeling about it. You know, the 2010 cycle, we sent a lot of good Congress people up there. And I have a good feeling about this one because I think the country is ready for a change. You know, we've got a great delegation in Georgia. You know, I've worked with most of that delegation in dealing with my own industry matters. You know, I can build consensus. I'll work with our delegation. You know, I believe as a freshman I can get some things done. I mean, I solve problems in my business. You know, I will join them. We can work together. And again, there are lots of other, you know, there are going to be lots of new people in Congress. And I think, you know, I think the establishment is probably going to listen.
Thank you, candidates. Orlando Montoya, your question now.
Various people have brought up harbor deepening. It's obviously one of the state's top economic priorities, but it's also a top priority in Florida, in South Carolina, in Virginia. And Congress really right now has no system of prioritizing all of these projects. Would you vote to authorize a national review of port expansion priorities? Mr. Mcleod.
I think that's going on as we speak. So, you know, my goal would be to fight like Dickens for Savannah. My goal, I mean, I believe it's a matter of national security is to get it done. Now, there's going to be, you know, Savannah's going to be deepened. Now, the percentage that the federal government pays and the percentage that the state of Georgia pays, that still has not been decided. And that will, you know, also play into Charleston and to the other ports that you mentioned. So, do I want a national review? No. Do I want to deepen Savannah Harbor? Yes, and I want to get it done by 2014.
Lee Anderson, let's come down the line toward you and the port question.
You know, we need to deepen the port, but no, I would not be for a review. We must take care of our situation, which is the Savannah port, so that our great state can go forward, and that way we can have our exports and imports move more rapidly to where we can get industry and manufacturing back in place in the state of Georgia.
Rick Allen.
Well, Savannah is very important to our district. We've got a lot of forest products industries that are, Savannah's an export port, and so, it's critical that we get that harbor deepened. As far as a national review, that gets into politics, and that's the thing we need to get away from. I mean, we need to look at the ports, and I'm going to fight for Savannah. Our district depends on it, our state depends on it, and again, it's an exporter.
And Maria Sheffield on the topic of deepening Georgia's ports.
Adding another level of bureaucracy to a government that is simply already out of control is something I am fundamentally opposed to. Now, deepening our harbor, yes, it's a matter of national security, and it's also a matter of jobs in our 12th Congressional District, because we have so many of our small farmers that take their products and they export them to other countries. The manufacturers that we have in the 12th Congressional District. Our farmers, our small business owners, they provide jobs in the 12th Congressional District. They need to get their products out of the port in Savannah. So I will do everything that I can to fight for our state of Georgia and to fight for the port in Savannah.
And Shannon McCaffrey, we have time for one more question, but candidates, you'll have to keep your answer short to get this in. If you would keep it to 30 seconds, we would appreciate that. Shannon?
I'll try to make it a question that can get a quick answer out of you.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of talk about extending the Bush tax cuts. Would you be supportive of, in any way, shape, or form, of increasing of ending the tax cuts for those making over $250,000 if there were corresponding spending cuts, deficit reduction cuts? Would there be anything that could get you to support a tax increase for those making over $250,000? Starting with Ms. Sheffield.
I believe in revolutionary tax reform. Simply tweaking our tax code is not going to get us where we need to be. I've been a proponent of the fair tax, have a policy statement and a video on the fair tax, and that's where my interest lies. Until we get to a fair system of tax here in this country, I absolutely will not support increasing taxes.
Right, Mcleod, you have 20 seconds on that one.
I guess so. I'm not for tax increases. I'm for tax decreases. But when you say your question, is there anything, maybe there's something out there, national security or war, I don't know. But certainly the tax code is broken. I'm for, when you just look at the Bush tax cuts, for extending them, I'm making them permanent. But when your question is anything, I guess so, but I can't think of it.
Lee Anderson.
We got to get back to the basics. We must balance the budget. We must take care of our tax program that we're in right now and fix it, fix the problem. We need to go to a more fair tax. We need to look at 999. We need to look at everything. Everything is on the table. We got to get back to the basics and balance the budget.
And Rick Allen.
That's coming up, and that's going to be a fight. And, I'm going to fight to keep those tax credits, because this economy is in trouble right now. And if we raise taxes in this country, federal spending is going to skyrocket, because we're going to have more and more people on entitlements.
Time's up. Thank you, Rick, for bearing with me on this. We're running short here. We have no more time for questions. Each of the Republican candidates in the primary for Georgia's 12th Congressional District now have 30 seconds, candidates, for closing statements. And Rick Allen was randomly selected to make the first statement. Rick, I cut you off, so I'll go right back to you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Well, it's been a great pleasure to be with you tonight. There'll come a time when our children and grandchildren will talk about the decisions that we made in this time of crisis in our country. And, I want them to talk well of us. The government is financing our standard of living on the backs of our children and grandchildren. That's wrong. I want my children and grandchildren to have the opportunity to live the American dream. That's why I'm in this race. And I'll tell you this, if you send me to the United States Congress, I will make sure that dream stays alive.
30 seconds goes by fast. Lee Anderson.
Again, I want to thank each and every one for coming tonight. Thank you for letting us come into your home. I'm Lee Anderson. I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. I get the job done. I believe in being a servant, not a politician. To get in touch with Lee Anderson His cell number is 706-394-1812. Communication is the key to getting this back on track in the great state of Georgia. We must balance a budget. You must send a leader.
And time is up, I'm afraid. Wright Mcleod, 30 seconds.
I believe in this country. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in this state. I believe in the 12th District. My name is Wright Mcleod, and I'm here tonight to ask for your support and your vote. Now, I'm not a career politician. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not a government contractor. I'm a husband, a father, a Christian, a conservative, a Republican, and a combat veteran. And with your vote, I'm going to beat John Barrow. My name is Wright Mcleod.
Maria Sheffield, 30 seconds.
Thank you to the Atlanta Press Club and those in the media who have been covering this campaign for us. You know, there is a difference between the candidates. I'm not a career politician. There's no question about who I've contributed to and who I have voted for over the years. I am a Ronald Reagan, Mike Huckabee Tea Party conservative who believes in limited government, fiscal responsibility, individual freedom, a strong national defense, and getting back to those traditional American values that have made this country so great. I am asking you for your vote and your support.
Thank you, candidates, very much for that and for sticking to our time. That concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters the primary elections come up Tuesday, July 31st. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. Also, want to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging tonight's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, go online at atlantapressclub.org. The debates that air on Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archived on the Press Club's website, and this broadcast has been streamed live and will be available on demand at GPB's website, gpb.org. I'm Richard Rogers. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.